All right, we've got a big one today. A real deep dive into Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
You know, the guy who didn't just build gadgets, but
Uh,
practically built entire industries.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible how much impact he had.
So we're going deep, exploring the roots of his relentless pursuit of perfection, that famous reality distortion field,
Ah, yes.
and how his complex personality shaped some of the most revolutionary devices in history.
It's fascinating how Jobs' upbringing seems to foreshadow so much of his later success. It's like the blueprint was there from the beginning.
Yeah. Isaacson really paints a vivid picture of his childhood in Mountain View. Imagine growing up with Silicon Valley as your backyard. Even though he was adopted, he was practically raised in the heart of this burgeoning tech scene, and his dad, Paul Jobs, a mechanic, he seems like he played a crucial role.
Absolutely. Paul instilled in Steve a love for tinkering and design. There's this great anecdote about Paul buying broken cars, fixing them up, and reselling them. Resourcefulness, attention to detail, craftsmanship, these were all values Steve absorbed early on.
Makes you wonder, do you think that hands-on environment in the garage shaped Steve's drive to control every aspect of the design process later on?
Right.
Like, was he always going to be a roll up your sleeves and get it done kind of guy?
It's certainly possible. And it wasn't just cars. Their Eichler home, with its clean lines and emphasis on functionality, that also seems to have had a big impact on Steve's design aesthetic. These homes were all about simplicity and integration with the surrounding environment.
You can practically see the through line from those Eichler homes to the sleek design of Apple products. But it's clear that Jobs' passion for technology went beyond just aesthetics. Remember that story about him landing a summer job at HP?
Oh, absolutely. And not just any summer job. At 12 years old, he cold called Bill Hewlett himself to ask for the position. Talk about initiative. That's classic Steve Jobs, going straight to the top and not taking no for an answer.
Definitely shows a fearlessness that would define his entire career. But it also shows his early fascination with electronics. I'm curious about the technical challenges Jobs and Wozniak faced when building the Apple I. What were some of the limitations they had to work around?
Well, they were working in a garage with limited resources, so they had to be incredibly creative and resourceful. They used off-the-shelf components and relied on Wozniak's engineering genius to overcome technical hurdles. The Apple I was a bare-bones machine, but it represented a significant step in making personal computers more accessible.
Speaking of accessibility, let's talk about the fusion of counterculture and technology that was happening around this time. The 1960s, the Bay Area, it was a melting pot of ideas. And Jobs seems to embody this unique blend perfectly.
Right. It's crucial to understand the context. You have the counterculture movement challenging traditional norms, embracing experimentation and questioning authority. And at the same time, technology is emerging as this powerful force. Jobs was at the intersection of these two currents, absorbing and synthesizing those influences.
It's like he was soaking it all in, waiting for the right moment to release his own unique vision onto the world. And his time at Reed College is a great example of this. He drops out but stays on campus, auditing classes, experimenting with LSD, exploring Eastern spirituality. It seems unconventional. But these experiences shaped his worldview and design philosophy.
Exactly. This period of exploration exposed him to different ways of thinking. He became interested in Zen Buddhism, with its emphasis on simplicity and minimalism, and that deeply influenced his later design philosophy. Even his trip to India seeking enlightenment played a role.
So we're seeing how Jobs' early life was a mix of these seemingly disparate influences, tinkering with his dad, the clean design of their home, the counterculture movement, and Eastern spirituality. But what's amazing is how he blended it all into his own unique vision. It's like those early years were forming the foundation for what would become Apple.
And that's what makes Jobs so fascinating. He doesn't just follow trends. He created them by blending seemingly unrelated ideas into something new and innovative.
Which brings us to the birth of Apple. It's an almost mythical story at this point. The Apple I. Then the groundbreaking Apple II, all starting in a humble garage with Steve Wozniak.
This is where the magic of collaboration really shines. Wozniak had the engineering genius to build these machines, and Jobs possessed the vision and marketing savvy to bring them to the world.
And that story about the breakout game for Atari is such a perfect example of their dynamic. Jobs set this impossible deadline, and Wozniak somehow managed to design the entire game in just 4 days.
That's Jobs' reality distortion field at work. Isaacson describes it as Jobs' almost supernatural ability to convince himself and others that the impossible was possible. And it wasn't just about pushing people. He had a remarkable ability to recognize talent and build teams.
Then comes the Macintosh, a true revolution in personal computing. Jobs wanted to create a computer for everyone, not just tech enthusiasts. The graphical user interface, inspired by Xerox PRX Alto, made computers intuitive and user-friendly.
Think about the impact of that. Before the Macintosh, computers were largely text-based and intimidating. Jobs and his team made them visual, accessible, and even fun to use. It was a game changer.
And the stories from the development of the Mac really highlight Jobs' intensity. Isaacson shares anecdotes from the Mac team, impossible deadlines, clashes over design choices. Debbie Coleman's observation about drinking the purple Kool-Aid, it sounds like Jobs was demanding, but also incredibly inspiring.
He had extremely high standards and expected everyone around him to meet them, but he was also incredibly passionate about his vision, and that passion was contagious. He created a culture of excellence at Apple.
Which brings us to one of the core elements of Jobs' philosophy. Design is a core value. He believed design wasn't just about aesthetics, but about making products intuitive and enjoyable to use.
He was obsessed with every detail, from the curve of a corner to the shade of a color. He famously said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works."
And his admiration for Dieter Rams and Braun products is well documented. The idea of simplicity as the ultimate sophistication. You can see that reflected in Apple products even today. This obsession with simplicity went beyond just aesthetics. Look at the original iPod. A single scroll wheel. Minimal buttons. He stripped away complexity, focusing on the user experience. And that became a hallmark of Apple products.
Jobs understood that true simplicity comes from deep understanding and careful consideration. Not from just stripping things away, it's about making complex things easy to use and understand. Like that story about Chris Espinosa designing the calculator. Remember that Steve Jobs roll your own solution.
Classic Jobs. That shows how deeply he cared about even the smallest details. And it leads us to another aspect of his success, the power of marketing. He was a master at turning product launches into cultural events.
Jobs understood the importance of storytelling and creating an emotional connection with consumers. He knew that technology was more than just specs and features. It was about how it made people feel.
And the iconic 1984 Super Bowl ad, directed by Ridley Scott, is a perfect example of his marketing genius. It was bold, provocative, and instantly captured the public's imagination. What's really interesting is that it almost didn't happen. There was resistance from Apple's board who thought it was too controversial.
But Jobs fought for it. He understood the power of bold marketing to cut through the noise and make a statement. And he wasn't afraid to use the media to his advantage. He was a master of PR, granting exclusive access in exchange for favorable coverage.
So, we've seen how Jobs' early influences shaped his vision, how he co-founded Apple, and how his obsession with design and marketing fueled the company's early success. But of course, the story doesn't end there. Jobs' journey had his share of twists and turns, including his departure from Apple and the ventures he pursued before eventually returning to the company he built.
His time away from Apple, at NXT and Pixar, is just as fascinating as his early days. It's a story of resilience, reinvention, and ultimately a triumphant return to the company that defined his legacy. Jobs leaving Apple in 1985. It wasn't just a business decision. It was a real turning point in his story. Getting ousted from the company he poured his heart into. It's like a Shakespearean fall from grace.
It definitely has that dramatic flair. You have to wonder how that kind of rejection must have felt, especially for someone as driven as Jobs. Did it bruise his ego or fuel his fire even more?
Isaacson paints a picture of a man who was deeply hurt, but not defeated, remember? Jobs was known for his intense personality and demanding management style. There were clashes within Apple, power struggles. The board ultimately sided with John Sculley. The CEO Jobs himself had brought in.
It's a good reminder that even the most visionary leaders aren't immune to office politics. So, what does Jobs do? He takes his ambition and channels it into two new ventures. Nexi, a computer company focused on high-end workstations, and an investment in a little-known animation studio called Pixar.
NXT was fascinating. Jobs was obsessed with building the perfect machine. Powerful, elegant, pushing the boundaries of technology. They were ahead of their time in many ways, with features like advanced operating systems and object-oriented programming.
And even though NXT wasn't commercially successful, those machines laid the groundwork for what would become OS X.
Right.
And it's like he was planting seeds for the future,
Yeah.
even if he didn't know it at the time.
Exactly. And then you have Pixar. Jobs' investment in the struggling company would lead to a whole new era of animation. Think Toy Story, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles. These films weren't just entertainment, they were artistic and technological breakthroughs.
It seems like Jobs had a knack for recognizing creative brilliance, Like, he could spot potential where others saw just risk. He empowered John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, Pixar's creative leads, giving them the freedom to push the boundaries of storytelling and animation.
But he didn't just hand over a blank check and disappear. Jobs was deeply involved, pushing Pixar's team, always demanding more. There are stories about him spending hours reviewing storyboards, scrutinizing every detail of the animation.
The relentless pursuit of perfection again. But in this case, it was applied to art. The storytelling. What's interesting is how his experience at Pixar seems to have softened him a bit. Isaacson describes how Jobs learned the importance of collaboration and giving creative teams space to flourish.
It was a period of growth for Jobs, both personally and professionally. And all of these experiences, the setbacks at NXT, the triumphs at Pixar, prepared him for his eventual return to Apple.
That's right, because in 1997, Apple wasn't the tech giant we know today. They were struggling, losing market share. It's hard to imagine Apple being on the verge of collapse, but that's exactly what was happening.
Jobs came back to a company in desperate need of his vision and leadership. And what does he do? He orchestrates one of the most remarkable turnarounds in business history. He streamlined the product line, cut unprofitable ventures, and focused on what Apple did best: innovation and user experience.
And this is the start of the iRevolution: the iMac, iPod, iTunes, and ultimately the iPhone. Each one of these products had Jobs' fingerprints all over them.
The I branding was deliberate. It stood for internet, individual, instruct, inform, inspire. Jobs wanted to create products that were personal, connected, and intuitive. The iMac, with its colorful, translucent design, was a radical departure from the beige boxes that dominated the PC market.
It was like a breath of fresh air, a statement that Apple was back, and they were doing things differently. And the iMac wasn't just about looks. It was incredibly user-friendly, embracing the internet and making computing accessible to a wider audience. What's really fascinating is how Jobs seemed to anticipate what people wanted before they even knew they wanted it.
He had an almost intuitive sense of the future of technology. Take the iPod. It wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the first to really get it right. Sleek design, intuitive navigation with the click wheel, and that 1,000 songs in your pocket vision that captured the public's imagination.
The iPod wasn't just a gadget. It was a cultural phenomenon. It changed the way we listened to music. And iTunes was a crucial part of that success.
Jobs convinced the resistant music industry to embrace digital sales, creating this seamless ecosystem where you could buy, manage, and listen to your entire music library in one place. He saw the potential of digital music distribution when many in the industry were still clinging to the old ways.
He was a master negotiator, a visionary,
Yeah.
a bit of a rebel all at the same time. And this brings us to the Apple stores. Remember, at that time, everyone thought Jobs was crazy for opening retail stores. They said it was a distraction, a waste of resources.
But Jobs and Ron Johnson, Apple's retail chief, had a different vision. They wanted to create a retail experience that was as carefully designed and curated as the products themselves.
They turned retail spaces into these sleek, minimalist temples of technology. Staffed with knowledgeable employees who were passionate about Apple products, it was a genius move. Suddenly, going to buy a computer or an iPod was an event, an experience.
Jobs understood the power of the Apple brand. He knew that the stores weren't just about selling products. They were about building a community, a tribe of Apple enthusiasts.
And that brand loyalty is something that most companies can only dream of. It's incredible how Jobs transformed Apple from a struggling company into the most valuable brand in the world. But, of course, the story isn't over yet. We still haven't talked about the iPhone, arguably Jobs' most impactful creation.
The iPhone was more than just a phone. It was a pocket-sized computer, a convergence of everything Jobs had learned over the years. It's a testament to his vision, his persistence, and his unwavering belief in the power of technology to change the world. And then in 2007, boom, the iPhone. It's almost hard to remember a time before smartphones, but Jobs really did change everything with this device.
Yeah, it really is crazy to think about how much things have changed. It wasn't just a phone. It was a whole new way of interacting with the world. Jobs had this vision of putting the power of the internet in your pocket, and he actually pulled it off.
You know, it's easy to forget about all the challenges they had to overcome. Think about the technical challenges involved. Touchscreens were still pretty new, the internet wasn't optimized for mobile, and battery life was a major concern. Jobs and his team had to solve a whole host of problems to make the iPhone a reality.
Isaacson really gets into the nitty-gritty of that in the book. He talks about Jobs' obsession with getting the design just right, the glass screen that stretched edge to edge, The incredibly thin and light profile, it sounds like he was pushing everyone to their
Oh,
limit.
absolutely. He was notoriously demanding. He
Yeah.
also inspired people to achieve things they didn't think were possible. He had this uncanny ability to see the potential in an idea and then relentlessly pursue it until it became a reality.
And it wasn't just a product that came out of that. It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. It transformed the mobile phone industry, spawned a whole new app economy, and fundamentally changed the way we communicate, consume information, and even navigate our daily lives.
Yeah. It's remarkable to think about how much of our lives now revolve around this device that Jobs envisioned. And it's not just the products themselves. Jobs' influence extended to Apple's marketing and retail strategies as well.
Absolutely. Those iconic product launches.
Yeah.
The sleek and minimalist Apple stores. It all contributed to creating this incredibly powerful brand that people are genuinely passionate about.
Jobs understood that a brand is more than just a logo. It's a set of values, a promise, a feeling. He wanted Apple to represent innovation, creativity, simplicity, and excellence.
And he nailed it. He managed to create this almost cult-like following of customers who were drawn to Apple's products and everything they represented. People lined up for hours to buy the latest iPhone. It became an event.
Jobs had this unique ability to connect with consumers on an emotional level. He understood that technology was more than just gadgets and circuits. It was a tool that could empower people, inspire creativity, and make their lives better.
But it wasn't all sunshine and roses, as we've discussed. Jobs was also a complex and sometimes contradictory figure. He could be brilliant and inspiring, but also demanding, ruthless, and even cruel at times.
That's right. Isaacson's biography doesn't shy away from these darker aspects of Jobs' personality. He paints a portrait of a flawed genius, someone who was capable of great things, but also inflicted pain on those around him.
And that brings up some tough questions. It raises important questions about the price of success, the toll that relentless ambition can take on a person and those around them. It also makes you wonder if Jobs would have been able to achieve all that he did without that uncompromising drive and intensity.
Yeah. It's a fascinating question, and ultimately one that we can't answer definitively, but I think it's clear that Jobs' passion, vision, and unwavering belief in his own abilities were essential to his success.
So, despite his flaws, there's no denying Jobs' impact on the world. He left behind a company that is not only incredibly successful, but also culturally significant.
Absolutely. Apple products have become ubiquitous, shaping the way we work, play, communicate, and consume information. It's hard to imagine our modern world without the Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, and all the other innovations that Jobs helped bring to life.
Where does this leave us? What can we learn from the life and legacy of Steve Jobs?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of passion and vision. Jobs was driven by a deep belief in the power of technology to change the world. And he never wavered from that vision, even in the face of setbacks and adversity.
He also taught us the importance of design, not just as a matter of aesthetics, but as a core element of the user experience. He understood that technology should be intuitive, elegant, and enjoyable to use.
And finally, I think Jobs' story is a reminder that it's okay to be different, to challenge conventions, and to never give up on your dreams. He was a rebel, a disruptor, and ultimately a visionary who helped shape the world we live in today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Steve Jobs, I think the message is clear. Find your passion, pursue it relentlessly, and never be afraid to make a dent in the universe.
And as Jobs famously said, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Thanks for joining us for this fascinating exploration. We hope it's giving you a new perspective on the man behind the machines, and maybe even inspired you to pursue your own dreams with a little bit of that Steve Jobs spirit.
Until next time.